I used to think there were two kinds of marriages, the dramatic ones that exploded and the quiet ones that lasted. Ours was quiet. It was lists on the fridge, weekend groceries, a running joke about the neighbor's ridiculous wind chimes, and a couch that remembered the shape of us. We were not the couple who made other people jealous. We were the couple who watered their plants during vacations and texted pictures of the tomatoes finally turning red. I thought quiet meant safe. I didn't understand that silence can also be where a thing dies without witnesses. My name is Jordan. I'm 40, an accountant who loves a good spreadsheet and a clean sink. My wife, my ex-wife now, is Hannah, 37, a pediatric occupational therapist who could talk any anxious kid into trying again. We met when a mutual friend invited too many people to a trivia night and pushed us together because we both knew what anastomosis meant. Our first date was coffee that turned into a walk that turned into dinner. She wore a raincoat even though the forecast was clear, just in case. I remember thinking I had found someone who could pack for both sunshine and storms. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony where the cake was slightly crooked and perfect anyway. We started collecting the gentle vocabulary of a life. Throw blankets, mugs, inside jokes. The first time I lost her was so ordinary it didn't register. She started taking the bus home instead of the train because the clinic staggered shifts. "It's only 15 minutes longer," she said. I said I'd meet her if it was late. She said it wasn't that kind of late. The first time she turned her phone face down at dinner, she said the screen distracted her. I agreed, glad she wanted to look at me instead of a glowing rectangle. The first time she bought a perfume that wasn't hers, citrus and something musky. I said it smelled like summer. She smiled like she'd tricked herself into believing that too. We didn't fight about big things. When we argued, it was about whether towels should be folded in thirds or halves, hers thirds. Whether a Friday night spent and counted as doing nothing, hers. No, it counts as being together. Whether my sister was overstepping when she texted Hannah about a recipe instead of me, hers. Your family's my family. We didn't say sentences like, "We need to talk," because we talked all the time, about nothing and everything. And I thought that was enough. It changed slowly. Real betrayals always do. You don't wake up in a different life. You drift into it. Hannah started talking about a new colleague, Andrew. Not Andrew at first, just the new OT. He had a way with the kids who hated water. He could get them to wash their hands by calling the sink a waterfall. I liked the story. I liked that she liked her work enough to bring it home. Then it was Andrew who brought muffins on Fridays. Andrew who played guitar quietly in the break room at lunch sometimes. Andrew who knew a shortcut to the freeway when traffic was a parade of red eyes. I pictured a gentle guy with patient hands, maybe a wedding ring he fidgeted with, when he waited for parents to sign forms. When she mentioned him the first 10 times, I heard him the way you hear a name in a book you're not reading. Winter came early that year. The city put up pale strings of lights that looked tired by mid-December. Hannah started staying late. "The clinic is understaffed," she said, and it was true. I brought dinner there a couple of times and watched her kneel on a mat with a kid who would not try stepping over the line until she made a game of it. She was so tender, it made my throat hurt. Andrew waved from across the room once. He looked exactly like the person I had imagined, which felt like a relief and an insult. One Thursday in January, Hannah said she was going to a continuing ed talk after work, sensory motor integration across the lifespan, a phrase so dry I didn't question it. I texted her at 9 to ask if she wanted me to warm up soup. She wrote, "Don't wait up. Love you." At 10:30, I heard her key in the door, the little scrape we both recognized, our house's version of a dog checking who's home. She smelled like the new perfume in the open air. She kissed my head and said the talk ran long. I believed her because that was my habit. The email showed up 3 days later because our insurer thinks of itself as helpful. "We noticed an out-of-network charge," the subject line said. It wasn't huge, just enough to flag a question. The charge was from a hotel bar across town, the kind where people sit on leather stools and pretend the lighting isn't doing them favors. I asked Hannah about it while we were cleaning the kitchen. She said the clinic had a little after-hours get-together there to send off a therapist moving to Seattle. "You know how they always tack it onto a company account and then bill us weirdly," she said. It was plausible. exactly plausible enough to be useless. She made it sound like bureaucracy, not a choice. I didn't become a detective overnight. I kept being a husband who wanted this to be a misunderstanding and not a plot. I noticed she started sleeping, turned away from me, her shoulders rounding the way you do when you're cold or when you're protecting something soft. When I reached for her, she sometimes flinched like she'd been tapped during a dream. I told myself she was stressed. I started doing more around the house to give her a landing place laundry folded before she had to sigh at it, the car washed, the trash taken out without anyone asking. I bought her the expensive hand cream she loved and put it next to her side of the bed without a note. I wanted her to feel cared for because I couldn't stand the idea that she had gone looking for care somewhere else. The day I stopped lying to myself was a Sunday. We were supposed to go to her parents for lunch, and she forgot the lemon tart she'd promised to bring. I ran back inside to grab it from the fridge. Her phone was on the counter, buzzing with a text that lit the screen. I can still taste the mint. Last night was... I did the math quicker than any spreadsheet I've ever built. My body went cold and hot at the same time, a fever that knew my name. I picked up the tart and walked back to the car and said nothing. On the drive, she asked if I was quiet because her mother was going to ask again about grandkids. I said, "We don't owe her an answer." She said, "I know." We ate lunch at a table that had fed their family for 20 years, and there was too much salt in the soup, and no one died. That night, I waited until she was asleep and then went into the kitchen and stared at the phone like it was an animal I did not want to startle. I told myself I was not the kind of person who snoops. I told myself I had already seen enough. I told myself the truth was a shared object, not a thing I needed to steal. Then I unlocked it. She hadn't changed the code because she didn't think she needed to. I wish I could say I only looked at one message. I scrolled until I felt like I was falling. There were no explicit photos, no cliché lines. It was worse. It was ordinary intimacy. How did your day go? I made the kid laugh during the sensory bin. You should have seen his face when the foam beads spilled. I saved you the last blueberry muffin. I'm picking up that coffee you like. Meet me by the back door. There were timestamps that made other parts of my life light up like a map at night. The out-of-network bar, the bus that wasn't a bus, the continuing ed talk about nothing, and threaded through like a river under everything, Andrew. His name, the way he used it on himself. Like he belonged in her pocket. I closed the phone and stood very still because the floor felt like it could tip. She was asleep, her face slack in a way that used to make me protective, and in that moment made me want to wake her up and ask her who she was. I carried the weight of not waking her back to bed and lay beside her, breathing shallow, counting the seconds between the heat clicking on and off. In the morning, I made coffee and scrambled eggs and stared at the basil plant until she kissed me on the neck and said, "You're sweet." It sounded like a statement about a fruit, not a person. I didn't confront her that day, or the next. I went to work and sent emails and sat in meetings where people talked about things I could track with my hands. I thought I could fix my marriage like I could solve an audit discrepancy. Find the number that doesn't add up, follow it back to the place someone wrote it wrong, and rewrite the line. That's not how hearts work. The wrong line keeps echoing. A week later, I asked if she wanted to go to the little Italian place we went to when we'd had the kind of day that wants something warm. She dressed nicely. The red dress I bought her last birthday, the one she said made her feel like a light. We split a bottle of Chianti and shared the salad and laughed about a story her dad told for the third time. It felt like holding the old shape of us up to the light and hoping the cracks didn't show. When the check came, she reached for it out of habit and I said, "No, I've got it." And then I said, "Is there anything you want to tell me?" It came out like a gentle question on a survey. She tilted her head the way she does when a child is trying to say what hurts. She said, "About what?" I said, "About Andrew." The room got quiet inside my head, even though someone behind me dropped a fork and swore at themselves. She put her hand on the table and spread her fingers like a starfish. "He's a friend," she said, and in her voice I heard a plea I couldn't translate. "We got close because work is hard. I should have told you. I didn't because I didn't want you to think it was something it wasn't." I said, "Did you kiss him?" The question surprised me by being simple. She looked at the little lamp on our table and then at me. Once, she said. It was a stupid moment. We were both exhausted and it felt like relief. We stopped. We said we wouldn't be those people. I stared at her face and tried to measure the scale of what once could hold. It occurred to me that once was a technology. Some people used it to mean never again, and others used it to mean not always. I said, I read the messages. She closed her eyes. She didn't ask what messages, which was its own admission. I'm sorry, she said, and there was a tremor in her voice that had convinced me of many things before. It convinced me then that she wanted to be the person she said she was. It did not convince me she was. We went to counseling in a room with a rug the color of oatmeal and a wall of diplomas. The therapist had the exact calm of someone who never forgets to drink water. We sat on a couch and tried to undo knots with sentences. Hannah cried when she said she had felt lonely in our house, like the couch we never sat on together had a dent with her name on it. I cried when I said I hadn't known how to bring the parts of me that were tired home without dumping them on her feet. The therapist said we had good bones, as if we were a house someone might renovate. She asked us to write down 3 small kindnesses we would do for each other this week. I wrote, listen without fixing. Put the phone away at dinner. Buy the good strawberries. Hannah wrote, tell him when I'm scared. Leave my work at the door. Reach for him first. We taped the list to the fridge like homework and tried to earn a grade. For a month, it felt possible. We went for walks after dinner and named the houses we would have loved to live in if we had more money and fewer attachments. We let our phones die on purpose and read in bed while our feet touched. The clinic changed Hannah's schedule so she didn't have to close twice a week. I liked the way my chest felt when I heard her key at 6 instead of 8. Andrew's name stopped appearing in the part of her conversation she brought home. She baked muffins herself one Saturday and brought them to the clinic Monday, and the text she sent me at lunch said, your blueberry ratio was perfect. I wrote back, I Googled it. She sent a heart. I felt like a man being lowered slowly back into his own life. Then there are the details I want to leave out because they make me sound petty. The way she smoothed her hair before reading a text. The way she sighed if I asked, who's that, too quickly. The way she started saying, I need space, like it was medicinal. We stopped sleeping pressed together. She had plausible explanations for everything. My body refused to accept them without a fight. I never hit him, or call him, or write something dramatic. The only dramatic thing I did was show up at the clinic unexpectedly with takeout on a rainy Thursday and ask the receptionist if Hannah was free between sessions. She smiled and said she'd check. While I waited, I watched through a glass panel, as kids missed and tried again, as therapists clapped, as the clock climbed. Hannah came out in her clinic polo and saw me and smiled. Real, surprised, happy. It relieved me and hurt me at once. You're here, she said. And I said I brought pad thai and a mango sticky rice and chopsticks we could fight over. You're the best, she said, and her hand found my arm in a way that made other things quiet. We ate in the break room with 2 other therapists who told me funny stories about a kid who refused to stop calling every ball moon. Andrew never appeared. The receptionist said, oh, he left early doctor's appointment. Relief arrived like weather. It didn't answer any questions. It just changed the air. 2 weeks later, I found the proof I had told myself I wouldn't need. It was in the glove compartment, of all places, because the universe either has a sense of humor or believes we should make the simplest discoveries the hardest way. I went to put the registration back, and a folded receipt slid out. One I recognized from the hotel bar, same place as the insurer's email. Different night. 2 drinks, 2 appetizers, 1 room charged after midnight. There are numbers that tell a whole story. I sat in the car and read the print like I was a student trying to remember if this was the test I could pass. I took a picture and then put it back where I found it, because I wanted to see if she would move it, because I was turning into someone who sets tiny traps for the person they love. That night, I set the receipt on the kitchen table like a third plate and asked, do you want to tell me before I ask? She looked at the paper and then at me, and then at the dog-eared corner of a cookbook, like she needed to check which chapter we were in. She said, I'm sorry, and sooner than I expected, without ornament. I ended it, she said next, as if order of operations mattered. I ended it last week. I told him that I can't be that person. I asked her how many times. She said 2. I asked her when. She named nights that were my nights too. I asked her why. She said the word lonely like it could explain gravity. She cried. I cried. We tried to put the same paragraph into our mouths and swallow it without choking. Here is what I learned in the months after. Reconciliation feels holy until it doesn't. We stayed. We worked. We practiced the new habits until they looked like us. Some mornings were so gentle I believed in redemption like it was a math equation. Then a sentence would knock everything back out of alignment. Her "I need space," my "who was that," the therapist's "what are you afraid will happen if you trust," my "stupid that it will be taken." We never found a way to make certainty sound like a promise instead of a threat. The day I let her go was a Tuesday. She had just come home from the clinic with a story about a kid who finally let go of the parallel bars and took 2 steps on their own. I said I was proud of her. She stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the hall and said, "I don't know how to be sorry anymore in a way that heals you." The sentence was a scalpel precise, kind, fatal to what was left. I asked if she wanted to stay. She said she wanted me to be okay. And I said the only sentence that felt both true and unforgivable. I don't think I can be okay here, with you. She nodded, the smallest nod, like when a child finally puts the shape into the correct hole. We separated gently, which is its own pain. No smashed plates, no public declarations, just 2 people who still loved how the other took their coffee and therefore labeled boxes in neat handwriting. She moved to a small place near the clinic with borrowed furniture and a plant she promised not to kill. I stayed in the apartment, which felt immediately too big, as if my voice could get lost in it. We told our families like we were reading from a script recommended by a therapist. My mother asked me if it was another woman. I said no, and then I said yes, but not now. She didn't insist on a villain, even though I know that would have made the story easier to carry. Divorce was a process with forms that asked unromantic questions. We split the savings and the plates and the mercy. She took the couch because it fit in her new place. I kept the bed because it didn't. Friends picked teams without meaning to. Some sent me articles about forgiving infidelity like homework. Some sent soup. My sister came over on a Saturday and taught me how to make a roast chicken so I would not starve out of pride. She cried when I said the house was too quiet. She reminded me it was only quiet in a way that would eventually feel like peace. For a while, quiet was a mirror I did not want to look into. There are things I would not have believed about myself that became true. I got jealous of strangers who could talk about 3 kinds of olive oil without their chest hurting. I caught myself deleting and re-adding our anniversary in my calendar because my finger kept hitting undo on instinct. I missed Hannah's laugh, the particular way it started with the corners of her mouth and worked backward. I did not miss the feeling of checking her face for weather like a sailor. I slept badly and then not at all, and then, one night, for 7 hours. And I woke up with a raw gratitude that made me sit at the edge of the bed and breathe like an athlete before a game. I kept a small notebook by the sink and wrote down each time a day went by without checking her social media. On day 13, I realized I hadn't thought about the number all day. Hannah texted me once, after the papers were signed. "I'm sorry for the harm I caused," she wrote. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth sooner. I am working on the part of me that wanted to be picked more than it wanted to be honest." I stared at my screen until it dimmed. I wrote back, "I know you love me," because I needed that to be in the record too. She wrote, I do. That wasn't the problem." The message hurt in a clean way, like alcohol on a cut you intend to heal. I thought I would be angrier than I was. Anger showed up, certainly, like a flash thunderstorm, flooding what it could reach. But mostly what I felt was grief, and then, slowly, a warmth that surprised me when it started. Relief that I no longer had to negotiate my reality. No more whispering arguments with myself at midnight about pin drops and bus routes and the semantics of once. No more conversations conducted entirely in the space between her eyebrows. I see Andrew sometimes because cities are not as big as we pretend. He was at the farmer's market one Saturday morning buying peaches like a man in a commercial for sincerity. He saw me and nodded in that way two men do when they know the shape of each other's ghosts. He looked smaller to me than he had in my head. That helped. I didn't say anything. He didn't either. The peaches were good. When people ask how I knew, I don't tell them about the receipt or the insurance email or the screen that lit up wrong. I tell them about the night she came home and put her head on my chest, and it felt like a courtesy. Your body knows before your brain can file the report. The evidence is just what you hand the part of you that still hopes it's mistaken. I don't have a lesson that makes this noble. I am not braver now than I was. I am only clearer. I know what my own voice sounds like in an empty kitchen. I know that I can cook enough to feed myself when feeding myself is the only promise I can make. I know that forever is not a guarantee but a practice, and you can be practicing different things in the same house without saying it out loud until the day someone says, "I don't know how to be sorry in a way that heals you." And you understand that you are both telling the truth and it isn't enough. I still wear my ring sometimes when I go running before the city wakes up. Habit or hope or both, I don't know. It spins loose on my finger now that I've lost a little weight from the months when food was an idea more than a fact. I passed the coffee shop where Hannah and I used to sit on Sundays and share the crossword. There's a couple with a dog who has a bandana for every season. I want to tell them to buy the good butter, to thank each other for the boring things, to keep the receipts only if they're for tax purposes and not because you will one day think they can stop a story from being true. I don't tell them anything because I am a stranger and because people do not learn from warnings. They learn from their own quiet collapses. Sometimes late at night, I sit on the floor with my back against the cabinet and listen to the hum of the fridge and the upstairs neighbor's radio and the steady animal patience of the world continuing. I think about the day, very early in our marriage, when Hannah and I got caught in a sudden rainstorm without umbrellas. And instead of running for cover, we walked slowly home, soaked and laughing, because we decided getting wet together was better than staying dry apart. I love that version of us. Loving it doesn't require loving what happened after. Last week on a whim, I bought a plane ticket to visit my friend in a city where I don't know the street names yet. I packed a carry-on with a raincoat, even though the forecast was clear, just in case. I laughed at myself in the mirror. At the airport, I didn't text Hannah out of muscle memory to tell her when I landed. I texted my sister instead, and she sent back a row of airplane emojis that looked like a parade. In the seat beside me, a woman fell asleep with her mouth slightly open and her book on her lap, and I felt a tenderness that didn't attach itself to a project. I closed my eyes and listened to the engines and thought, this is what it feels like to be carried by something that isn't a promise but keeps moving anyway. I don't know yet what my life will look like when the edges stop feeling like edges. I know I will buy strawberries even when they're too expensive and eat them out of the carton over the sink. I know I will learn a new route to the train without resenting it. I know I will stop counting how many days since I saw her name somewhere unexpected. I know there will be a morning when I wake up and realize I am late to nothing and on time to myself. People like to say time heals. Time doesn't do anything by itself. You do. You make tiny choices that stitch you together. Wash the mug, change the sheets, answer the friend's text, read the chapter, stand on the balcony, and notice the light slanting across a wall the way it did the afternoon before you knew, and the afternoon after because the sun is not interested in your plot. You catch yourself smiling in the cereal aisle because a kid in a dinosaur shirt just declared loudly that he is braver than milk. You believe him. You go home. You lock the door. You sleep through the sirens again. You wake and make coffee and, without trying, you don't imagine sharing it with absence. You bring the mug to your lips. It is still warm. You drink. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.